Here we go. John, this is Paul, and we have your engine in place, and we have this is your alternator conversion right here, conversion kit to alternator, and of course we had to start a rebuild, and we detailed the engine. We made sure that I think we've tuned it up as well. I have to look back through all the records as to what all we did do. There's as you see this hole right here in the head, that is for your temperature sensor. This line right here, this very fine line right here, that has like a reinforcement around it, spiral reinforcement. That is your capillary tube for your sensor. There's an ether bulb that goes in that hole. There's a little well that goes in there. Ether bulb goes in the well, and then you have a capillary tube going up to your temperature gauge. So that gauge will probably have to be replaced, or we can switch over to an electronic gauge. But again, you'd be looking at having the gauge rebuilt. As far as the engine sitting in place, it looks really good. These engine mount lag bolts. Look, I'm showing you the head of it. Well, let me point to the head of it here. So, right there is the head of the bolt. The head of the bolt back here. So, we've set the engine in place, and determined that, and tried to bolt it down, and discovered that and it's not odd, but it happens a lot. Discovered that the holes, the threads in the screw holes were stripped out. So again, we had just set the engine in place, so it wasn't a big deal. We raised the engine back up. We drilled those holes out to smooth bore them, and then we epoxied in a dowel rod, and then let that cure overnight. The next day we came back and we dropped the engine in place, and we aligned it with the prop shaft. The engine aligns to the prop shaft. The prop shaft is, of course, one end is secured in the strut bearing, and then the other end, it basically floats till it gets to the other end at this coupling. So, and it has to come through the shaft log, which is a casting that's down here in the on the keel. Has to come through the shaft log in the center, so that if we have to adjust in the future, up or down, then we're in the middle of the range. And so we removed the packing gland right here. That's and the hose. And sorry, I screwed my focus up. But the packing gland and the hose, we removed those so that we could make absolutely sure that we're coming through the shaft log in dead center. And it has to be done visually. You can't really, you really can't tell for sure if you're in the center of the hole or not. So without removing the packing gland. So the next step will be just to slide the prop back, put the packing gland on, and slide the prop back in. We have at the coupling, we have less than 2 thousandths difference in the measurement, the gap between the two coupling halves. When we put a gap in them, and then we measure the gap at the 12 o'clock position, 6, 9, and 3, and that might make more sense if we were to look at the end of the coupling, like a clock. 12 o'clock position being the top, 6 o'clock being the bottom, 3 o'clock being the sides, 9 o'clock being the other side. So we want to have that just as those surfaces just as close to parallel as absolutely possible. And so we've done that as well. We've got that all lined up. That will give you the maximum life on the coupling, the prop shaft, and your output bearing right here on your transmission as well. Without properly aligning that, which is a several hour process, without properly aligning that, you will overload that bearing and damage this, and the seal will be damaged, and you'll be leaking oil into your bilge, and or break your shaft off just behind the coupling, and or have to put up with a whole lot of vibration. So for all those reasons, we take this step of aligning the engine properly. So I'm going to go back and check the economics on this thing. I think we had charged you for the alternator conversion. Whoops, there it is, the alternator conversion. And we had also set some money aside for slick seaming the bottom and painting the bottom. And I'll go through, but unfortunately I think we spent most of the slick seaming the bottom money on getting this guy put in, getting these holes doweled and re-drilled, getting this alignment done, and so I think we spent most of our bucks on that. But and we may be due for another payment, but we may have a little in the kitty as well. So I'm going to check that stuff out, and I'll let you know. You'll probably either way you turn it, we're probably due for an invoice anyway to keep going. But and the next step would be actually to work on the bottom, slick seam the bottom, which is to help you get it soaked up without white knuckles and a lot of concern. And then and we'll soak it up and make sure it soaks up as well, and of course put the a bottom coat on the bottom. And then anything else that you decide that you may want to do, if there is anything else that you want to do, then that would also fit in there. I'm just kind of looking to see. And of course we've rebuilt your carburetor. And of course you can look back as easy as I can. You can look back to the invoices and see what all we've done to the engine. I mean, basically did everything but rebuild it, and so we spent probably about half of normally when you rebuild an engine, it's just the machine shop cost on rebuilding the engine. If you rebuild the carburetor and give it a tune-up and rebuild the water pump and rebuild the starter and rebuild the generator, then of course that ends up being about as much as rebuilding the engine to begin with, the rest of the engine, so which is just the block, the pistons, the cam, crankshaft, all that stuff. So we didn't rebuild any of that stuff, but we didn't rebuild the engine, we just rebuilt all the ancillary equipment. Because even if you have a running engine, if your ancillary equipment it's not charging the battery, or your starter's not kicking out when it starts, and and you're not tuned up properly, then you end up you don't really have a running engine. So you and I made the decision to do all the ancillary equipment some time ago. All right, so I also had some. We thought we were waiting on you for payment, and we weren't. So I also have some rental. Some space rental to refund. So we'll talk to you soon about all this progress. Thank you.